Welcome to the Open Forum in the Villages, Florida. In this show, we talk to leaders of clubs and interesting folks who live here in the Villages to get perspectives of what is happening here in the Villages, Florida. We are a listener-supported podcast. There will be shout-outs for supporters in episodes.
This is Mike Roth. And listeners, I'm thrilled to share with you this podcast, which is my passion project for you. This podcast brings you knowledge, inspiration, and a lot of things that people need to know about the villages and the people living here. Be sure to hit the follow button to get the newest episode each week. Creating this podcast is a labor of love, even though it demands more time I can easily spare. Now, here's where you come in. You can help us keep the podcast alive and thriving. How? By becoming a supporter. The easy way for you to support us is to visit our podcast webpage, openforuminthevillagesflorida.com, and click on the supporter button at the top of the page, or the purple supporter box. Even a small donation of $3 to $10 a month makes a big difference, and you can cancel your subscription at any time. Your support means the world to us. Stay curious, stay inspired, and keep those headphones on. I hope everyone enjoys today's show. How can you support our podcast? This is Mike Roth, and listeners, I'm thrilled to share with you this podcast, which is my passion project. This podcast brings me joy, brings you knowledge, inspiration, and a lot of things that people need to know about the villages and what's actually going on. Creating this podcast is a labor of love, even though it demands more time than I can easily spare. But hey, time isn't something we can buy back, right? Now, here's where you come in. You can help us keep the podcast alive and thriving by becoming a supporter. Visit our podcast website, openforuminthevillagesflorida.com, and click on the black supporter box. Even a small $3 to $10 a month donation makes a difference. And guess what? You can cancel anytime, no strings attached. Thank you. Support means the world to us. Stay curious, stay inspired, and keep those headphones on.
Hope you enjoy today's show.
This is Mike Roth on Open Forum in the Villages, Florida. I'm here today with Wayne Richard. Thanks for joining me, Wayne.
Thank you.
We're going to do a backwards interview show where Wayne is going to interview me.
We're going to turn the tables. What do you say we begin at the very first? The earth cooled. Then the dinosaurs came.
Fred Flintstone came.
Then you were born.
In Brooklyn, New York.
In Brooklyn, New York.
Deut.
What was it like growing up in Brooklyn?
My earliest memories are probably when I was 3 or 4 years old, living in Far Rockaway, New York, on a street called Gibson Street. My mom bought me
Was that next to vodka?
my birthday was coming up, probably my 4th birthday, and she bought me a Hopalong Cassidy black outfit, black shirt, black
Easy for you to
pants,
say.
black boots,
Yeah.
black hat,
Wow.
and a pistol.
So you were going gangster back then.
Cowboy.
Cowboy. Okay. What's
Yeah.
Brooklyn?
No,
Long Island.
that Brooklyn is on Long Island, and Far Rockaway is part of Queens.
Okay.
And then we moved to Miami, where I went to kindergarten. And
Why move to Miami?
my parents moved to Miami, so I went with them.
And what did your parents do?
Oh, that's a good question. My dad was a designer of leather goods, primarily ladies' handbags, pocketbooks, and purses.
Mhm.
And he worked with his brother. They had a business, Max Roth Incorporated.
Sounds official.
Oh, yeah. It was in the Soho district of Manhattan. Many times as I was growing up on a Saturday morning, Dad would take me and my brother. So we went to the factory in Soho. I have one full brother, a half sister, and a half brother.
And what was it like growing up with them? Did you get along? There
We got along.
wasn't any tension or knife fights?
Oh, no knife fights.
Okay, that's good.
Might have been pillow fights.
What about your education?
That's a good question. I went to high school in Brooklyn, New York at Samuel J. Tilden. I played in the band from the time I was in junior high school. I played trombone.
That's a hard instrument to play.
Oh, yeah. You have to learn the positions. There were 7 positions.
7 positions.
Otherwise, you'd be out of tune. And then you had to tune the thing with the coil at the back.
I had a lot of problems with the piano when I started. I was blowing into it. I don't think that's the way it's supposed to work.
Unless it was a player piano.
No, I never had a player piano. I was the only player on the piano.
My grandmother had a player piano, and as much as the grandkids tried, we couldn't get it to play.
When did you start to develop your deep tones?
Probably someplace in high school, when given a choice of either taking a speaking part in a play or running the spotlights and lighting board, I chose the lighting board and spotlights.
Really?
Absolutely. I didn't like being a downstage center and talking to the audience.
Now, that's interesting in light of what you do now.
I had stage fright.
Now, what about radio? Did you ever gravitate towards radio? And
Yes.
what happened?
When I was in college, I applied to the City College of New York radio station to be a DJ or announcer. They rejected my application. They said I didn't speak right. I couldn't say the word cigarettes correctly.
Yeah.
I did, but that's after the speech training.
So you learned how to enunciate.
How to enunciate and say words in a neutral American speech pattern.
So in other words, you don't say things like y'all.
I had the great gift of being able to mimic speech patterns that I hear enough. So if you all want to hear Southern accent, I can suddenly switch into a Southern accent because I spent a lot of time in the South as I was working. There were about 4 years where I lived on a...
But I've never been to India.
Never been to...
Never been to India.
Oh, I don't say I can do that.
I see all kinds of computers in here. Could I fix one of them for you?
Sure, I'll find the one that doesn't work.
Did your theatrical endeavors back then involve improv?
I don't think so. I don't know in the 60s or so there was much improv going around. Elaine May and Mike Nichols were the people that you listened to on records and LPs, and they were the first improv artists that I'm aware of. I ran through a lot of jobs and was very successful in the Fortune 1000, selling computers and phone systems.
You got involved with all of that as the electronic computer revolution began.
I was an electrical engineering student in City College for 2 years, and after 2 years decided that electrical engineering wasn't for me, and I switched into the business school. I graduated with a management and the marketing degree, and then went on to some graduate school at the Blue College. The only course that I ever dropped in college was a computer course. There was some Fortran programming, and the first thing you had to learn is how to operate an IBM 029 key punch. I go to the first class, and there's this big machine that's punching holes in cards, and you type in strange stuff, and I had no understanding of how it worked. And so I said, before I fail the course, I'm going to drop it. Yes, that's what I did. Out of college, I worked for Mayor Lindsay for about 2 years, learned to hate politicians in general.
Was probably a great moment for you.
Yes. As a young man, what drove me crazy about the politicians was that every place that I went, because I was working in Lindsay's office and Mayor Costello's office, everybody wore stage makeup all the time.
Including Abbott and Costello.
Who's on first? What's on second? When I was in college, after I got out of college, working for Lindsay, I wound up with a radio show on Thursday nights on WNYC. I would interview Mayor Lindsay. And the piece de gras of me deciding I got to get out of a job that's related to politics.
That's delicious if it's prepared right. It's really good.
Okay. I've never had it.
It's wonderful.
Anyway, so Lindsay and I finishes this radio show at about 9:30 on a Thursday night. It's a cold winter night. We walk out of the station. I'm wearing a coat. Then Lindsay pulls his hat down over his forehead and turns up the collar of his long winter coat. We're walking towards the subway, and I said, Mayor Lindsay, why did you turn up your collar and pull down your hat? It's not that cold. He says, Mike, I don't want anyone to recognize me. So I looked around in the attic here. I might even have a 9-minute tape of one of those shows that I did with Mayor Lindsay. After I left the political job, I went to work for the Burroughs Corporation, selling adding machines and calculators door to door in Manhattan. They had a backup just in case the electricity went out.
So people are desperate in case the power goes out and they need that backup.
They had that crank backup. Yes. Every once in a while I would get funny with them and I'd bring a small Chinese abacus along with me and say, in the event that you can't pull the crank, here's a little abacus you do it with your finger.
That's a desperation.
Sold a lot of machines, so I got promoted into their computer division.
Okay.
Sold small accounting computers, what I would call the first desktop computer. their Series L 2000. It was very successful, but I was working 5 days a week trying to sell and install these computers. And another day to learn more, I just couldn't finish working at night and going to school at night. So I stopped the master's degree. Then I got offered a job working for a company called Telex.
While he tries to figure out who he is and what he did in the past, we should take a break and get that spot in.
For Dr. Craig Curtis.
Absolutely.
Dr. Curtis, what do you think the future looks like, Alzheimer's treatment in America?
I think the future looks very good. These blood tests are going to make a significant difference in our ability to detect Alzheimer's disease before symptoms. A person who develops memory loss due to Alzheimer's disease, we know that disease actually started approximately 2 decades prior. Amyloid starts building up for approximately 20 years, which then initiates brain cells to die off, essentially, which leads to Alzheimer's disease. We're trying to remove that amyloid prior to that so we can prevent Alzheimer's disease. Once somebody already has cognitive changes or memory symptoms, we're trying to figure out if reducing that amyloid really slows the disease. We now have the world's first medicine on the market that is slowing Alzheimer's disease by removing amyloid from the brain. And we're looking at newer, more advanced forms of those medications that remove the amyloid.
With over 20 years of experience studying brain health, Dr. Curtis's goal is to educate the village's community on how to live a longer, healthier life. To learn more, visit his website, craigcurtismd.com, or call 352-500-5252 to attend a free seminar.
Okay, so
Have you figured out who you are?
I am on Genghis Khan.
Another great Chinese restaurant, ladies and gentlemen.
At Telex, I learned that I could work 5 days a week and make twice as much money than I did at Burroughs. I really liked that. I took a territory, which was only Long Island where I lived. It was great. We went to a meeting in California, and that was when IBM and Telex got involved in an antitrust lawsuit. The president of Telex settled the suit, and all of a sudden, of the 120 salespeople that they had, they were down to 20, and I was one of the 20. And so I had a territory that went from Boston down to Washington, D.C., west to Pittsburgh. And all of a sudden, I had the beginnings of living on an airplane. I remember the first day on that job, I go into the VP's office. I had a skin graft on my thumb because a car fell on me. He looks at me and says, "Mike, I need to give you 3 things." He counts out $400 bills. That's cash. It's spending money. Then he gives me an air travel card. Then he gives me a Diners Club card. He said, "Mike, you never eat alone. You don't eat lunch alone. You don't eat dinner alone. Take prospects and clients out to lunch and dinner all the time. I expect to see a lot of expenses from you."
What you are suggesting is my brother-in-law was the North American CEO for Hewlett-Packard. He had to entertain people, make them feel good and make them feel comfortable so that deals could be done.
People had to feel comfortable with you and the company that you represented. I guess the thing that got me out of Telex Products was too many 4 a.m. telephone calls. I remember selling Avis when they had the Wizard of Avis. I called it, got me out of that business with Telex, was a call at 4 o'clock in the morning from the IT director of Avis saying, "Hey, Mike, your service engineer is asleep in the computer room on the floor behind the disk drive." I said, "I guess I'll be right over."
Yeah.
And,
Getting sleep at 4 in the morning.
and so at 4 in the morning, I go over and kick Julio in the side, take him into the cafeteria, coffee him up, and get that thing working. One of the guys who trained me at Telex took a job working for a company called Action Telecommunications, and they sold something called the Watts box. They were competing with AT&T, and they found a way to dramatically reduce the cost of the number of Watts lines that a company needed. I go in there. I really didn't know very much about it. I was a computer guy, not a telecommunications guy. And I'm making a prospecting call on NYU. And all of a sudden, I get the president of NYU on the phone. He says, "Yeah, come on down and talk to me about that. We have too many Watts lines here." And I said to my boss, "John, I don't know what I'm doing, John." He said, "Why don't you take Jerry along with you? He's an ex-telephone company engineer." So I took Jerry along. We went down to NYU, and I came back with $1 million order. All of a sudden, I was a miracle man there. I said, "What do I do with the check, the down payment?" And my boss says, "Go out to JFK put it on an airplane to Tulsa because we needed to make payroll.
Did you enjoy this?
Fun?
Was it something that you ever expected to do?
Absolutely not.
What did you expect to do? What was your big dream as you were growing up?
I was going to be a successful engineer, an electrical engineer. I loved working with that stuff. I still have soldering irons in the closet.
See, I wanted to be a conductor.
Okay,
And I can.
there in Chicago.
So that was your private dream?
That was a private dream.
And why didn't you go for it? What held you back? I'm fascinated by this subject because so many people think, oh, if I had only done this or I have only done that.
I had too many problems going through electrical engineering school. I think I was too young when I started.
Mm-hmm.
And they assumed that you could learn calculus and physics at the same time, as well as overloading me with English and social studies. I remember staying up all night trying to read a book by Dos Passos because there was going to be a quiz on it the next day. I passed the quiz, but the physics and calculus lessons took a lot to be desired. In those days, you had something called mechanical drawing, where you had to see things in 3D on a piece of paper. I found that exceptionally difficult. Okay, so I'm going into the...
Like to wear the glasses when they go into the theater.
Yeah, I'm in the second year of engineering school, and I'm failing my physics course. So I asked a couple of my fraternity brothers to tutor me so I could pass the final exam. Some of the problems they tutored me on were on the final exam, miraculously. And so I got an A on the final exam. I'm looking at the posting of my grades in front of the professor's office. The professor walks out and he sees me and says, "Mr. Roth, come inside." And he said, "I'm going to make a recommendation to you. I have no idea how you got an A on the final exam because you weren't performing like that the entire quarter." And he says to me, "I recommend that you find another major, not an electrical engineer." It was very shattering. I did a little bit of counseling over that summer and determined that I did occupational testing. And they said I should either be a funeral director or something in business. So I went into the business school where I discovered that I could work part-time to make a few extra shekels and get A's on every course in the business school. My mind worked that way.
Yeah.
And then I was very successful in sales at telex, at Action Communications.
Okay, so after all of that success and traveling down a road filled with computers and wires and plugs and lights flashing, you eventually reach a place called The Villages.
Yes.
When did you move?
I got to the Villages in 2017.
How did you find out about it and why did you come?
I was in Cincinnati. I was running a successful Sandler training, primarily a sales training company. We did management training, customer service training. I had 30 or 40 years of improv in sales, learning the dance.
That was the birth. That's the eggshell.
One of the things I learned to do to train people was to break things up into chunks. The smaller the chunks, the better, because people would remember it. That meant that I would do magic tricks to bring out points, and I became very good at it.
So what did you do? You pull a sales slip out of your head?
It was just a little entertaining thing, pouring water into a cup, holding the cup over a student's head and saying, "If I pass the pencil through the cup, what's going to happen?" And they would cringe.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would pass the pencil through one side of the cup. And I said, "You have nothing to worry about because this is a self-sealing cup." I pushed it to the second side of the cup. They cringed and they said, "Oh, that's going to be bad." I said, "Okay, and what's going to happen when I pull the pencil out of the cup?" They said, "It's going to get wet." I said, "Nope, self-sealing cup, not a problem." Then no water came out. And I took the top of the cup, turned it over on the guy's head, and no water came out. What I said next in the sales training stuck in people's heads.
When did you graduate to the next trick?
Which
was taking a box and having a person lay down in the box, close the box, and then poke them with pencils from each side of the...
No, that's an interesting magical trick. When I was back at Action, one of the guys working with me was an amateur magician. He said, "Come to my magic show, and I'll need an assistant." I took Kay to the magic show, and I told my buddy she's going to be the blonde sitting next to me. We picked her out of the audience, brings her up on stage, and he had one of those boxes where you saw someone in half. She was actually sawed in half on stage and put back together.
When you discovered the Villages...
Let me tell you how I discovered the Villages, because I was in...
Wait, I was going to ask you.
Okay.
How did you discover the Villages?
I was a member of the Rotary Club for 20 years in Cincinnati. And a lady that ran a travel agency named Pat, who was a client, retired, sold her business, and moved to the Villages. I thought I'd never see her again. Pat tells me about the Villages and how they had town squares, 3 town squares, movie theaters, happy hour, and then live bands in each one of the squares all night.
Alligators.
And he made it sound so great. I said, okay, I don't believe it. I'd never heard of it. I went home, looked it up, and sure enough, there was a place called the Villages. I told my wife about it, and she said, oh, I have a cousin who lives there. I said, sometime I'll go visit her. The next year, Sandler ran the conference in Orlando. I took my wife to the conference, and that year, my wife's mom died. The second day of the conference, she says, I'm leaving. She left, and I left a day later. The next year at the Sandler conference in Orlando, she says, I want to visit my cousin in the Villages. We visited for a few days. They took us on a gasoline-powered golf cart ride from Spanish Springs to the new town square at Brownwood.
It's like an international flight, isn't it?
45 minutes smelling gasoline fuel.
You get 2 movies and a meal.
Yeah, that didn't happen. We took the ride, and I became convinced that I will never own a gasoline-powered golf cart. I did become convinced that there might be something to this Villages place. The next year, Christmas, we did a lifestyle trip, a familiarization trip. We did a second one.
Did you ride the bus?
We never rode the trolley, no.
Everybody should do that one time. I want to drive one of those.
You have to have a CDL. They're looking for drivers, Wayne.
I drove a bus in the Navy.
So you have a CDL?
I used to.
Okay.
It's expired.
Yes, we have a good improv skit called The Villages Trolley.
We get into the world of Mike Roth and improvisation. And how did that happen?
David Sandler, there's pictures on the wall behind you. David kept saying, Sales is a Broadway play performed by a psychiatrist. I want you to take acting courses and improv courses.
Okay.
And occasionally he brought people into our training sessions who were professional actors or improvers. But I was too busy running the business and training people to take the courses. But when I got here, I joined 6 acting courses and 1 improv course.
Partridge.
Acting courses, I decided that I hated it. I hated memorizing lines. At Burroughs, they gave us a script to memorize to sell this J800 multiplying machine. Every time you hit the X key, you never knew what the number was going to come up. And when you hit that X key on the J800 made in France with plastic gears, it was never going to hit 56088. But we had a quota to sell these things. So I was trying to sell them like everyone else as an adding machine and a subtracting machine. In graduate school, I was taking a course in statistics, and I learned that you needed to have a seed number for random calculations, and that actuaries would open up a book of random numbers and randomly pick one out. One day, I had one of these heavy French machines under my arm. I walked into an actuarial's office. I said, I want to speak to the head actuary. I've got a random number generator to show him. I put this machine down on his desk and said, this is an adding machine, subtracting machine, and a random number generator. He said, I don't believe it. I said, okay, look, you hit 1, 2, 3, and then you hit the random number key, which is an X, and 4, 5, 6, and you hit equal. He did it about 10 times. It never came up to the same number twice. He laughingly says, I'll try it. Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the perfect example of getting your actuary together. Once you have your actuary together, life is a lot easier.
Steve is here.
I wish you'd get on a different channel. All right, go ahead.
A week later, I go back to pick the machine up because no one really kept the machine as a multiplying machine. And he says to me, Mike, I want 4 more of these. So I wrote up an order for 5 machines, turned in the order, and they paid me my commission. A month later, I get a call from the guy that I sold the machines to. I'm scared shitless that he wants to return them because I was already paid my commission. I said, Mike, those machines are working great. They create seed numbers for me. They're saving me a lot of time. I don't have to pick up heavy books. I said, okay. He says, I've just referred you to 3 of my actuary friends in town. They each want about a dozen machines. So I went out to see these guys, and I sold 3 dozen machines. I was feeling like a king, turned in the orders, went home. The next day at 8 a.m., I come in, and the branch manager is sitting on my desk, holding the orders in his hand. He said, Mike, what the heck is this? And I said, I sold some of those J800s. He said, Mike, you sold more J800s in one day than the branch did in the last 6 months. He said, yes, sir. That was my job. And he said, how'd you do it? I said, I sold them as random number generators.
Yeah.
He held my commission back for 6 months to find out whether the machines would get returned.
If you want a real random number generator, Bally's Hotel in Las Vegas does a great job. The machines are very loose. All right, now let's get into the business of improv.
The
Which
business
is what most people embrace you for
Okay.
here in the villages.
So I joined the only improv club, and a fellow named Brian was running it. And he was doing primarily improv games and exercises. There was a small group, maybe 20, 25 people that came every week. I enjoyed it. 6 months into it, he says to me, Mike, I took a job in Boston for $200,000 a year. I'm leaving the villages, closing the improv club, unless you take it over. And I said, I was enjoying it. I didn't want to take it over.
Yeah.
I said, give me a day or two. Let me talk to a couple of my acting friends. So I wound up talking to Greg Golden. I said, Greg, can you help me run this improv club? I had no idea what to do. I've never been an improver as a stage performer. We quickly determined that we had enough talent to perform some shows with a little more training. We doubled the number of sessions per month from 2 to 4. We had about 140 people on the roster, and only 20 were showing up. That was difficult to manage. We decided to put dues of $10 a year to get rid of anyone who wasn't serious. And it worked. We went down to a nice, manageable 20 or 25 people. We worked towards creating our first show. The first show we did was for Mercedes Benz Club, a club that I had founded. And I think you were in that one.
I came here to the villages thinking, now I got a chance to sit back, listen to some great musicians I've never heard before, maybe see some plays, maybe do a couple of plays. Then what happens? I wind up in a band. I wind up doing a play. I wind up doing all these things. And it just happens. This is such a vibrant area filled with talent. I think that's one of the reasons people are interested in improv. They connect it not only because of the hard work and fine work that you do, keeping it together and promoting it and all that, but they also connect it with TV shows like Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Right. And that was some of the inspiration of the conversion of the club. We went to a 3-minute short form improv, and that was perfect. And that very first show we did for the Mercedes Club, I asked you for a single song parody for Slow Drivers, and you came up with a 5-song melody, which was fantastic.
People ask me about it all the time. They also ask me to do a couple of other stories with other shows. It's nice when you can make a mark and people remember you. You're certainly making memories for people with this improv show. If people are interested, how can they keep up to date on what's happening with the improv?
Best thing is to send an email to Mike at thevillagesimprov.com. Say you want to be added to our email list. We have about 4,000 people, 5,000 people on our email list, and we announce our shows. The other way is to, regular basis, go out to the website, thevillagesimprov.com. If you went out there today, you will find that we have a show at the Joke Joint coming up on March 15th.
Which is in?
That's an unrestricted language show.
It's beautiful. They got restaurants, so you make a night of it. You have dinner and then go see this.
The owner is half Cuban, half Puerto Rican, and they serve a Cuban meal. Okay.
Yeah.
Pulled pork, pulled chicken.
And pulled names out of a hat.
The show's got a cover charge of $20.
A lot of entertainment for $20.
2 drinks.
Yeah.
For 2 alcoholic drinks with dinner, it's $25. The unlimited, all you can drink ticket is $30. It only seats 80 people, and you have to call them directly for a reservation. It's 352-871.
That brings us to the final question.
The final Jeopardy question.
Would you like to phone a friend?
That's
Friend,
what I gotta say.
knowing that you have spent your life climbing the mountains of technology and finally winding up in the valley of improv, do you think that artificial intelligence could do a good improv show? And if so, what would it sound like?
That's an interesting question. If you would have asked me that question 2 years ago and you said artificial intelligence, I would have said, no way. I don't use it.
That would have brought you back to politics.
Right. And today, for this podcast, I use a lot of AI. All of my announcers are AI voices. It's easier to work with them. The show transcript is created by AI. The show description is created by AI. The AI creates 5 show titles And I picked the one I like best, the AI, the show, and divides into chapters. So the listener can jump to a particular point, the AI, the show, and turns into a YouTube video. Now, I did ask the AI to write an improv show. It's about 6 months ago. And what it came back with,
going to contact the authorities. Shouldn't be playing around with that stuff.
the improv gave me 8 or 9 scenes. 4 of them were either not accomplishable by our team or the scope of time that we wanted to do. We wanted to keep the scenes down to 3 to 4 minutes. And we don't do long form here. If you want to see long form, go to the Sarasota Improv Festival second weekend of July. Fantastic. 5 theaters simultaneously for 3 nights for $79. Can't beat it.
And if you want real long form, go see the opera Aida. But bring a sandwich.
I thought that was scripted.
It's 5.5 hours long.
Yeah.
I don't care if it has a script or not.
You did a long form improv with Dean Corbett. The only thing that made that show really great, you as the detective would
yes.
get the song.
The singing detective.
But it floored the audience because no one expected a singing detective.
I didn't expect it.
It made the show.
I got the phone call one day. You are now a singing detective. Fine, we'll work it out.
So we took the scenes that the AI suggested, which were doable, and we did add them to the show. We added them to our rehearsals to find out if they played, and some of them played and some of them didn't. We probably have the 300 different scenes that we've done over the past 4 years. For the past 2.5 years, we have a playbook on the club member website where people can go back and learn about those scenes.
You can see, or you can hear, folks, that we have gone with the life of Mike Roth all the way from EIEIO to AI in
A musical guy come up with that.
And first of all, I want to thank our listeners for listening and thank you for allowing me to probe into your life.
I'm teaching the course in Podcasting 101.
Okay.
And I've given people a homework assignment. I have something to play back next Wednesday for them.
That's great. I'm glad to be a part of the scholastic stuff. I wish you had been around when I did my podcast back in Chicago. Conversational. I've learned more about you in the past. What has it been?
30, 40 minutes.
Is there anything else you'd like to reflect on in your life?
I did a podcast in Cincinnati between 2014 and 17. Before that, I had done radio commercials. I did 1 or 2 with the announcer from the radio station. And I said, I could do better than he can. And I would go into the studio and record 5 spots. And then I would watch this engineer named Rob, who I'm still in touch with.
To be in that band.
Rob, 5 spots.
They were great.
I was advertising on this guy's show, Gordon Liddy.
Oh, that is Gordon Liddy. I wonder, trying to figure out 2 things. Who is that gentleman and why is the frame crooked? Do you live on a hill or something or what?
But he was criminally insane.
Oh.
But he had a listenership and my commercials were very successful, but they were expensive. I decided to try this podcast and I interviewed company owners in Cincinnati that I thought had companies that I would like to do business with as a sales training company. And damn it, if in the first 3 months it wasn't cash profitable, I stopped doing the radio and instead put some of the radio commercials into the podcast. And I asked tough questions of owners and managers. That podcast got about 90,000 listens. It still gets 5 or 10 listens a week. I can't believe it. I haven't done anything to it since 2017 when I sold my business.
No. Well, folks, this is your interviewer, Wayne Richards. I'm going to turn back the listenership to Captain Roth, and he will be set sailing for future podcasts right here on the network.
But this is on Buzzsprout or the open forum in the Villages.
Sounds good to me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Remember, our next episode will be released next Friday at 9 a.m. Should you want to become a major supporter of the show or have questions,
please contact us at mike@rothvoice.com. This is a shout out for supporters, Tweet Coleman, Ed Williams, and major supporter Dr. Craig Curtis at K2 in the Villages. We will be hearing more from Dr. Curtis with short Alzheimer's tips each week. If you know someone who should be on the show, contact us at mike@rothvoice.com. We thank everyone for listening to the show. The content of the show is copyrighted by Roth Voice 2024, all rights reserved.